And just when you thought that the tension between Elon Musk and President Trump had died down a little, it's reignited. Musk has been speaking out fiercely against Trump's big bill. He's even threatening to primary Republicans who campaigned on reduced government spending but are now voting for the bill, writing on X, "They will lose their primary next year if it is the last thing I do on this earth." Musk also said he'd create a new political party if the bill passes. In typical President Trump fashion, at almost 1 in the morning, he bashed Musk on Truth Social. Trump said that Musk knew about the president's opposition to an EV mandate and that not everyone should be forced to own one. The president then wrote, "Elon may get more subsidy than any human being in history by far, and without subsidies Elon would probably have to close up shop and head back home to South Africa. No more rocket launches, satellites, or electric car production, and our country would save a fortune. Perhaps we should have DOGE take a good hard look at this. Big money to be saved." Musk then responded by saying he wanted to, quote, "cut it all." Meanwhile, frustrations with the bill extend, of course, to Capitol Hill. You can't paper over the real-life consequences of adding tens of trillions to the debt. Sky-high interest rates, higher borrowing costs for cars, for homes, for credit cards. Americans are going to feel this, unfortunately, everywhere they look. Well, the Musk versus Trump thing is probably the most entertaining element of all this, right? It's otherwise, I think, rather difficult to keep track of all the labyrinthine processes of this bill. And we're talking obviously about 9 a.m. in Washington. It may be a different situation by 10 or 11 because of votes. But what do you make of the Musk-Trump? Yeah, it's sort of inevitable, right? I mean, we knew that Elon Musk wasn't going to stay quiet forever after their initial feud when Elon left the administration. There was a time period where he did pull back a little bit, which apparently came after a phone call from Vice President J.D. Vance, and then Chief of Staff Susie Wiles, who called him and said, "Hey guy, maybe you should be a little quiet for a while and back off some." And he abided by that for a couple of weeks, but obviously his concerns about the bill have not gone away, which is understandable. One of the main things he was interested in when he went into government as that special employee was cutting the deficit. This bill obviously does not do that. And the Senate version has turned out to be even worse in terms of adding to spending than the House version, which has angered a lot of House Republicans too, and I think rightfully so, which, to be fair though, they knew that was going to happen going to the Senate. They have a slim majority there. There's a lot of moderate Republicans who are worried about making changes to things like Medicaid. But one thing the Senate bill did do that was better than the House version from a conservative perspective was it actually phased out the EV tax credits and the green energy tax credits faster than the House version did. That's probably about the only nice thing you can say about it. Sure, I mean, I do think it's interesting that the Republican Party is getting, well, its leadership is having difficulty corralling people at both ends of the Republican spectrum. And to your point about the Senate bill being worse from a fiscal conservative position, look, I know all the projections are very tentative because the bill is literally changing as we speak, but we're now up to a projection of about $3.3 trillion being added in total to the deficit over the course of a decade, up from about $2.4 trillion in the House version. So obviously if you're a Rand Paul or a Ron Johnson or a Mike Lee, those are serious concerns. I think the broader issue for moderates, and certainly for a lot of Democrats, are the Medicaid elements to all of this, which are projected to have a lot of people lose their health coverage. We see Lisa Murkowski, the last reporting that we have, appears to be a no on this bill, which would bring the number of Republican senators up to 3, which is the maximum permissible. It would leave J.D. Vance breaking a tie. But Murkowski, apparently concerned about the Medicaid implications, despite there having been a number of efforts to buy her off. There was one provision put in about whalers in Alaska and how they could more easily claim certain things as charitable contributions, which really seemed to be more about their work than charity. But you also see the White House and the Trump Rapid Response account tweeting out that he has made good on his promise to have no tax on Social Security, which is just not true. It's 80. They say 88% of people who receive Social Security will not have taxes on it, but it's through some, sort of backdoor way of getting to cutting the taxes, but it only applies to people over the age of 65. So If you're, for example, a widow who takes Social Security early because you don't have any income to survive on, maybe you're 60 or 61 years old, you don't get the benefit of that tax break. So there's a lot of people who I think Republicans would find deserving of not having their Social Security taxed who are not included in this provision. Yeah, no, I mean, I think that's a completely fair point, and there is a whole issue about whether it's Social Security or the Medicaid thing, which is projected, at least by some, to impose requirements that, yes, do take out people who are not entitled to get it in the first place. But the worry is that it catches other people in that same net by making the requirements more cumbersome to comply with. And it seems to me that these kinds of criticisms are a big reason why most polling suggests this legislation is not that popular. There's a Quinnipiac poll late last week, 55% of voters against, 29% supporting the bill, 16% no opinion. So, yeah, those numbers can move around a bit. Obviously, in all opinion polls, there's a range. But if you were a Republican who was on the fence, looking at those kinds of numbers, you wouldn't be terribly reassured by that, to say the least. Yeah, I do think the one thing Trump has working in his favor here is that spending bills tend to be unpopular at the time that they're being debated, and then the public kind of forgets, right? Right. And, I mean, a classic example, albeit not a budget bill, obviously the Affordable Care Act had massive opposition at the time, has become more popular over time, and there aren't really, I don't think, the same wholehearted efforts to repeal it that there were early in its existence. Yeah, exactly. I think that ultimately, if the bill gets passed, Republicans in a couple of years, maybe even by the midterms, are not going to have that be the thing that's hanging over their heads as they're running for re-election. Up next, the Trump administration is now suing the city of Los Angeles, and we'll tell you why, coming up on Rising.